My name is Elizabeth Foster. I'm 62 years old, and 10 years ago my life changed forever when my daughter Melissa dropped her 3 little boys at my tiny apartment. "Just for 2 hours, Mom," she said. "I have a job interview." Those 2 hours turned into days, then months, then years. I raised those boys from toddlers to teenagers, giving them everything I had. Then last year, Melissa reappeared with expensive lawyers and sued me for kidnapping her own children. But I had kept one piece of evidence all these years. When I handed that sealed envelope to the judge, his eyes widened. "Do they know what's inside?" he asked. "Let me know where you're watching from today. If you're a grandparent raising grandchildren, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how that envelope saved our family." I never planned to raise a second family. At 52, I was settling into a quiet retirement after 30 years as a pediatric nurse. My small one-bedroom apartment in Portland was perfect for me. Just enough space for my books, my small collection of houseplants, and the occasional visit from friends. My husband James had passed away 5 years earlier from heart failure, and I'd grown accustomed to the rhythm of life alone. My relationship with my only daughter, Melissa, had been strained for years. She was bright and beautiful, but had always struggled with making good decisions. By 32, she had 3 sons by 2 different fathers, neither of whom remained in the picture. Her battle with prescription painkillers had started after a car accident when she was 25, and over the years had evolved into a more serious substance abuse problem. I tried to help, offering money rides to rehab facilities, watching the boys for weekends. But Melissa's pattern was always the same. A tearful promise to get clean, a few weeks of sobriety, then back to her old habits. I loved her fiercely, but had learned to keep a certain emotional distance to protect myself from the constant disappointment. That Tuesday in October began like any other. I was making tea and planning to attend my weekly book club when frantic knocking rattled my apartment door. When I opened it, Melissa stood there, hair unwashed, dark circles under her eyes, with 3 exhausted little boys huddled around her legs. "Mom, I need your help," she said, already pushing past me into the apartment. "I have an interview for a real job. Good money, benefits, everything." Jamie, Max, and Liam, 6'4" and 2 years old, looked up at me with wary eyes. They were wearing mismatched clothes that didn't quite fit. The youngest, Liam, had a diaper that clearly needed changing, and Max clutched a tattered stuffed dinosaur like it was his lifeline. "Melissa, you should have called," I said, but already I was kneeling down to hug the boys. "I don't have anything set up for them here." "It's just for 2 hours, Mom. 3 tops." She dropped a small backpack that apparently contained all their belongings. "There's some diapers and snacks in here. I really can't miss this opportunity." I looked at my tiny apartment. The single bedroom, the small living area with 1 couch, the kitchenette with barely enough room for my small table. This was no place for 3 active boys. "Where's the interview?" I asked. "Downtown, some marketing firm." She was already backing toward the door. "I'll be back before dinner, I promise." Before I could ask more questions, she kissed each boy quickly on the head, told them to be good for Grandma, and was gone, the door closing behind her. Jamie, the oldest, looked at me with eyes too serious for a 6-year-old. "She said we might have a sleepover at your house," he said quietly. My heart sank. This wasn't a 2-hour favor. Even then, I think I knew. The first night was chaos. I made a quick trip to the corner store for milk, cereal, and a few toys while a neighbor watched the boys. I converted my couch into a bed for Jamie and Max, while Liam would sleep with me. Dinner was macaroni and cheese, the only thing I had that I knew children would eat. Bedtime brought tears. "I want Mommy," Max cried, while Liam simply wailed, too young to even articulate his confusion. Jamie, already the little man of the family, tried to comfort them. "Mom will come back tomorrow," he said, but the uncertain glance he threw my way told me he wasn't convinced. When the boys finally fell asleep, I tried Melissa's cell phone repeatedly. Each call went straight to voicemail. My texts remained unanswered. By morning, with still no word, worry began to gnaw at me. By the second day, that worry had morphed into something closer to panic. It was while unpacking the small backpack to find clean clothes that I discovered the note hastily scribbled on the back of a gas station receipt and tucked into a side pocket. "Mom needs a break. Sorry." Just 5 words to explain abandoning 3 little boys. 5 words that would change all our lives forever. I decided to wait one more day before contacting authorities. Perhaps this was just another of Melissa's impulsive decisions, and she'd show up apologetic but ready to take her children home. I told myself this even as I bought more clothes for the boys and called my book club friends to cancel for the foreseeable future. But Melissa didn't come back the next day, or the day after that, or any day that week. And just like that, at 52, I became a mother again to 3 frightened, confused little boys who had no idea that their temporary stay with Grandma would stretch into years. After a week of waiting, making excuses to the boys each night about why their mommy hadn't returned, I had to accept the reality of our situation. Melissa wasn't coming back anytime soon, if at all. These children needed stability, schooling, proper medical care, all the things I couldn't provide in limbo waiting on a daughter who had vanished. My first challenge was purely logistical. My 1-bedroom apartment simply couldn't accommodate 4 people. The boys were sleeping on makeshift beds, couch cushions on the floor, my old sleeping bag. Jamie and Max were sharing the couch while Liam slept with me in my bed. We were quite literally stepping over each other in the cramped space. My neighbor Carol, a paralegal, became my lifeline. Over coffee while the boys napped, she outlined what I needed to do. "You need to file for emergency temporary guardianship," she explained. "Without it, you can't enroll Jamie in school, can't get medical treatment if one of them gets sick, can't apply for any assistance programs." The legal process was intimidating. I gathered what documents I had. The boys' birth certificates that Melissa had fortunately left in the backpack, my own identification, the handwritten note. The family court was busy and understaffed, but the urgency of 3 displaced children moved us up the list. The judge, a stern woman with kind eyes, granted me emergency custody for 6 months. "We'll try to locate the mother during this time," she explained. "If she doesn't appear, we'll consider more permanent arrangements." With legal standing as their guardian, I could now tackle the next hurdles. Using nearly all my savings, I put a deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment in the same building. It was still tight. The boys would share one room with bunk beds and a crib, but it was a step up from our current situation. The financial reality hit hard. My nurse's pension and Social Security had been adequate for one person living modestly, but nowhere near enough for 4 people, 3 of whom were growing children. I applied for whatever assistance we qualified for: SNAP benefits for food, Medicaid for the boys' health care, a child care subsidy so I could look for part-time work. Each night after putting the boys to bed, I would sit at the small kitchen table with a calculator and budget sheet, moving numbers around, trying to make them work. Sometimes I'd find myself crying quietly, overwhelmed by the sudden responsibility and uncertain future. The boys' emotional needs were even more challenging than the practical ones. Jamie at 6 understood enough to know his mother had left them. His questions were direct and heartbreaking. "Did we do something bad? Is that why Mom left?" Max's confusion manifested as behavioral problems, tantrums, refusing to eat, nightmares that woke us all. Little Liam, barely talking, regressed to baby-like behavior, wanting to be held constantly. I established routines knowing children thrive on predictability. Breakfast at 7, walk to the park, if weather permitted lunch at noon, quiet time with books, dinner at 6, bath, then bedtime with stories. The rhythm of our days gave us all something to hold on to when everything else felt uncertain. Enrolling Jamie in the local elementary school required multiple forms and explanations. The school counselor promised to keep an eye on him, understanding his situation. Max was still too young for kindergarten, but I found a Head Start program 3 mornings a week that would give him social interaction with other children his age. Through it all, I kept trying to contact Melissa. My calls went unanswered, though occasionally I'd receive a text, "Need more time? Boys okay?" or "Working things out. Thanks, Mom." Each message gave me momentary hope that she was getting her life together, that this was indeed temporary. But as weeks stretched to months, these messages became less frequent. My support network grew organically. The mothers of Jamie's classmates offered hand-me-down clothes and birthday party invitations. My book club friends took turns watching the boys so I could grocery shop alone. The elderly man next door taught Jamie how to play chess. The church I hadn't attended since James died provided Christmas presents when I couldn't afford them. That first Christmas, as an unexpected family of 4, was both heart-wrenching and beautiful. We decorated a small tree with homemade ornaments. I used some of my precious savings to buy each boy one special gift, along with necessities like winter boots. We baked cookies using my mother's old recipe. When Jamie asked if we should save some for his mom, in case she comes home for Christmas, I nodded and helped him set aside a plate, even though I knew she wouldn't come. After 14 months, Melissa's sporadic text messages stopped completely. A certified letter I sent to her last known address came back marked, "Return to sender." Her old friends hadn't heard from her. It was as if she had deliberately disappeared from our lives, leaving me to raise 3 boys who asked about her less and less frequently as time passed. By then, I had stopped seeing our situation as temporary. This was our life now. These boys were mine to raise, to love, to guide into adulthood. And despite the hardships, despite the worry about Melissa, despite my own fear about being an older parent to young children, I was determined to give them the stable, loving home they deserved. As the years passed, our makeshift family found its rhythm. By the time the boys were 5, 7, and 9, we had moved to a modest 3-bedroom rental house with a small backyard. The additional space was necessary as the boys grew, but the increased rent meant I had to return to work part-time at a local clinic, using my nursing experience to help cover our expenses. The boys began calling me Grandma Mom, a title that perfectly captured our unique relationship. I was their grandmother by blood, but filling the daily role of mother in every way that mattered. The term first came from Max during a school project about families, and it stuck, becoming our own special identifier. Each boy had developed his own distinct personality with needs that required different approaches. Jamie, now 9, had become serious and responsible beyond his years. He excelled academically, particularly in science, and had developed a protective streak toward his brothers and me. Sometimes I worried he had taken on too much too soon. I would find him helping Liam with his shoes or setting the table without being asked. Always watchful, always trying to make things easier for me. "You don't have to be the grown-up, honey," I told him one night as I tucked him in. "That's my job." He looked at me with those old soul eyes. "But you need help sometimes. Dad and Mom aren't here to help you." I never knew what to say to these moments of painful clarity. I settled for hugging him, promising that we were a team, but that I was the captain and he could just be a 9-year-old boy. Max at 7 was our family's challenge and joy. His kindergarten teacher had noticed his struggle with letters and reading, leading to testing and a diagnosis of dyslexia. The specialized tutoring strained our budget, but I refused to let his learning difference hold him back. What Max lacked in reading ability, he made up for in creativity. His artwork covered our refrigerator and walls, vivid, detailed drawings that told stories his words sometimes couldn't. Liam, our baby now 5 years old, had grown into a sweet, sensitive child who remembered almost nothing of his life before coming to live with me. His only significant health issue had been a frightening asthma attack when he was 4, resulting in an overnight hospital stay that depleted my emergency savings. Watching his tiny body struggle for breath, the nebulizer mask dwarfing his face, I had never felt more alone or more determined to protect him. Financial hardship was our constant companion. My part-time nursing salary combined with my pension covered our basic needs, but just barely. I became an expert at stretching dollars, buying in bulk, repurposing clothes from older to younger brother, finding free community activities instead of expensive outings. The boys never had the latest toys or brand name clothes, but they never went hungry, never missed needed medical care. My own health presented challenges as I moved through my 50s. Arthritis made mornings painful, especially in winter. My blood pressure required medication and monitoring. There were nights I collapsed into bed, body aching from chasing after energetic boys all day, wondering how I would manage as they grew into teenagers as I grew older. Through it all, I maintained meticulous documentation of everything related to Melissa and the boys. Each attempt to contact her was recorded with date and method. Every returned letter was saved. School records, medical appointments, growth charts, vaccination records. Everything was organized in color-coded folders. I wasn't sure why I felt such compulsion to document our lives, except perhaps a lingering fear that someday I would need to prove I had done everything right. 3 years after the boys came to live with me, with still no contact from Melissa, I applied for permanent legal guardianship. The court process was thorough, requiring home visits from social workers, interviews with the boys' character references from teachers and neighbors. The final hearing was brief, the outcome never really in question given the circumstances. The court finds it in the best interest of the children to remain in the care of their grandmother. The judge announced, signing the papers that made official what had been true in practice for years. That night after the boys were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and allowed myself a good cry for the relief of legal security for the daughter who remained lost to us for the strange twist my life had taken. The boys were legally mine to raise now, but the bittersweet nature of that victory wasn't lost on me. My gain was predicated on my daughter's absence, on 3 little boys' loss. As the boys grew older, questions about their mother became more specific, harder to deflect with general reassurances. At dinner one night, Max asked point blank, "Did Mom leave because she didn't love us anymore?" I put down my fork, looking at 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me, waiting for an answer that could heal or hurt. I had always tried to keep Melissa alive in their hearts, speaking of her with love, showing the few photos I had, assuring them that she loved them very much. But they were old enough now for more truth, if not the complete truth. We sat in the living room, the dinner dishes abandoned, and I tried to explain addiction in terms they could understand. "Your mom has a sickness," I explained. "It's a sickness that makes it hard for her to make good choices sometimes. She loved you very, very much, never doubt that. But her sickness made it impossible for her to take care of you the way you deserved." "Will she get better someday?" Liam asked, his eyes wide. "I hope so, sweetheart. Many people do recover from this sickness. And then she'll come back for us." The hope in his voice broke my heart. I chose my words carefully. I don't know what will happen in the future, but what I do know is that this is your home, and I am not going anywhere. Ever. Jamie, always the most perceptive, asked the question I'd been dreading. Did she abandon us on purpose? I took his hand. She made a choice she thought was best at the time. She knew I would keep you safe and loved. It wasn't a complete answer, but it was the most honest one I could give without destroying their image of their mother entirely. The full truth. The note saying, "Mom needs a break." The ignored calls and texts, the complete disappearance, was a burden they didn't need to carry yet. That night marked a shift in our family. A certain innocent hope faded, replaced by a more grounded understanding of our reality. We were a family forged not by typical circumstances, but no less real, no less loving for its unconventional beginning. Time passes quickly when you're raising children. Before I knew it, my grandsons had grown into young men of 12, 14, and 16. Our small rental house, once seemingly cramped, now felt full of life and teenage energy. The quiet retirement I had once envisioned for myself had been replaced by a home vibrating with music, sports equipment, video games, and the constant hum of activity that comes with raising 3 boys. Jamie, now 16, had grown tall and thoughtful. He excelled in advanced placement classes and had already started talking about college with a particular interest in medicine. "Just like you, Grandma, Mom," he would say, and my heart would swell with pride. He'd joined the cross-country team, running miles each day with a dedication that reminded me of his grandfather. On weekends, he volunteered at the same hospital where I had once worked as a nurse, wearing his volunteer badge with the same pride I had once worn my own. Max, at 14, had transformed his early struggles with dyslexia into remarkable strengths. While reading remained challenging, his artistic talent had blossomed into genuine skill. His art teacher had entered his work in regional competitions where he'd won several awards. Music had become his other passion, teaching himself guitar through online videos, filling our home with melodies that expressed what his words sometimes couldn't. His learning disability, once a source of frustration and tears, had become simply one aspect of a creative, vibrant personality. Liam, our youngest at 12, had grown into a kind-hearted boy with his father's dimples and his mother's expressive eyes. His early asthma had mostly resolved with proper medical care, though he still kept an inhaler for emergencies. What distinguished Liam most was his extraordinary empathy. He was the peacemaker when his brothers argued, the first to notice when I was tired or sad, the child who brought home stray cats and campaigned to adopt them. "You have a gift for seeing people," I told him once, and his simple response, "You taught me how to look," had brought tears to my eyes. At 62, I felt every one of my years some mornings as I rose to prepare breakfast before school. The arthritis in my hands had worsened, making simple tasks like buttoning a shirt or opening jars painful on bad days. My hair had gone completely gray, and the lines on my face told the story of both laughter and worry. But I had found reserves of strength I never knew I possessed. I had raised these boys through childhood and now navigated the complicated waters of adolescence, learning about video games and social media, teenage slang, and shifting friend groups. Our community had become an essential part of our success. My neighbor Carol, whose legal advice had been so crucial in the beginning, now helped Jamie with his college applications. The mothers who had once donated outgrown clothes now offered rides to sports practices and advice about high schools. My book club friends had become the boys' honorary aunties, celebrating birthdays and achievements as if the boys were their own grandchildren. Throughout the years, I had maintained my careful documentation of our lives. Each school photo report card and medical record was preserved in detailed scrapbooks, one for each boy. I recorded their heights marked on the kitchen doorframe, saved artwork, and school essays kept newspaper clippings when Max's art was featured or Jamie's team won a meet. I told myself this meticulous record-keeping was for Melissa, so that if she ever returned, she could see what she had missed, could know her sons even after years of absence. But as time passed, I began to realize these archives served another purpose. They were evidence of a family built through adversity, proof of our resilience. Each photograph of a birthday celebration or holiday gathering demonstrated that we had not merely survived Melissa's abandonment, we had created something beautiful in its wake. I had never stopped trying to find my daughter, though my methods had evolved with technology. Social media searches, online public records, even hiring a private investigator for a brief period when I received an unexpected tax refund. But Melissa seemed to have vanished completely. No arrest records, no social media profiles, no credit history after she left the boys with me. It was as if she had deliberately erased herself from our world. The boys' questions about their mother had become less frequent as they grew older and built their own identities. Family therapy, which we attended monthly, thanks to a sliding scale community program, had helped them process their feelings of abandonment in healthy ways. "It's her loss," Jamie said during one session when he was 15. "She missed seeing us grow up." The therapist had caught my eye, acknowledging the healing represented by that statement. The shift from "what's wrong with us" to "what did she miss?" On my 62nd birthday, the boys surprised me with a special dinner they had planned for weeks. Jamie drove them to the store for ingredients, Max created handmade decorations, and Liam baked a lopsided but delicious chocolate cake. As we sat around our dining table, now crowded with 3 nearly grown boys, I looked at their faces. Melissa's eyes, their father's features, but expressions and mannerisms that had developed during their years with me. "To Grandma, Mom," Jamie said, raising his glass of sparkling cider. "Who took 3 scared kids and gave them a home?" "To Grandma, Mom," his brothers echoed, and in that moment I felt a contentment that transcended the financial struggles, health concerns, and uncertain future. We had built this family together day by day, year by year. Whatever came next, that achievement could never be taken from us. Or so I believed until the certified letter arrived the following Tuesday. The envelope was official-looking, addressed to me with a return label from a law firm I didn't recognize. I opened it while standing at the mailbox, expecting perhaps a jury duty notice or property tax assessment. The contents turned my world upside down in an instant, a lawsuit filed by my daughter Melissa, claiming I had unlawfully abducted and retained her 3 minor children. She was suing for immediate custody, substantial damages for emotional distress, and supervised visitation for me if deemed appropriate by the court. My hands shook so badly I could barely refold the papers. I made it inside and collapsed onto the couch, my mind racing. Kidnapping. After 10 years of silence, after abandoning her children with nothing but a hastily scribbled note, Melissa was accusing me of kidnapping. The legal document contained allegations that chilled me, that I had deliberately concealed the children's whereabouts, refused to respond to her attempts to contact them, and systematically alienated them from their mother. According to the filing, Melissa had been desperately searching for her children for years, hiring private investigators and reaching out to family members who conspired with me to keep the boys hidden. It was a complete fabrication, a twisted alternate reality that bore no resemblance to the truth of our lives. But it was printed on legal letterhead, filed with the county court, scheduled for a hearing in 3 weeks. I called Carol immediately, my voice barely controlled. "I need a lawyer," I told her. "A good one. Right now." The lawyer Carol recommended David Greenfield reviewed the papers in his downtown office the next morning. His expression grew increasingly troubled as he read. "This is unusual," he said, finally setting down the documents. "The statute of limitations for custodial interference would normally have expired years ago, but she's making some creative legal arguments to get around that." "Can she win?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Can she take the boys?" He leaned back in his chair. "The court always considers the best interest of the children above all else. These boys have been in your sole care for 10 years. That carries significant weight." He tapped the papers. "But her attorney is good, expensive, and she's making some damaging allegations here." "None of them are true," I insisted. "Truth is important," he agreed, "but so is evidence. We need to gather everything you have that contradicts her claims." The retainer for David's services depleted what remained of my modest savings. But the alternative, facing this lawsuit without proper representation, was unthinkable. When the boys came home from school that day, I had to tell them what was happening. We sat in the living room, the same room where years earlier I had explained their mother's addiction. Now I had to tell them she had returned, not with open arms, but with accusations and lawyers. Jamie reacted with immediate anger. "She abandoned us. She can't just show up after 10 years and take us away." Max went quiet. His expression shuddered in the way it always did when he was processing difficult emotions. Liam, still young enough to remember very little of his mother, looked scared. "Will we have to go live with her?" he asked in a small voice. "No," I said firmly, with more confidence than I felt. "This is your home. You're staying right here with me." That evening, after the boys had gone to their rooms, a black luxury SUV pulled up outside our house. A woman stepped out. Stylishly dressed hair, expertly highlighted designer sunglasses despite the early evening hour. It took me a moment to recognize my own daughter. Melissa looked nothing like the disheveled, desperate young woman who had dropped off her children a decade earlier. This Melissa exuded wealth and confidence. She stood on our modest front lawn, surveying the house with a critical eye, making no move to approach the door. After a few minutes, a man emerged from the driver's side. Tall, distinguished, considerably older than Melissa. They spoke briefly, then returned to the vehicle and drove away. I realized I had been holding my breath. Seeing her after all this time, so close yet making no attempt to see the children she claimed to have been desperately searching for, confirmed my suspicions about her true motives. The following days were a flurry of legal preparation. David helped me gather my years of documentation, returned letters, phone records, the original note. Melissa had left court orders granting me guardianship. The social worker who had conducted our home studies years earlier agreed to testify. Teachers, coaches, and neighbors wrote character statements about my care of the boys. Melissa's attorneys filed motions to interview the boys privately, which David fought successfully. "They can testify if they choose to," he explained, "but she doesn't get private access to them before the hearing." Jamie, now 16, insisted on testifying. "I remember everything," he said with a hardness in his voice that worried me. "I remember her leaving. I remember waiting for her to come back. I want the judge to hear it from me." Max was hesitant but ultimately agreed to speak in court as well. Only Liam, who had been too young to remember the abandonment, asked to be excused from testifying. I assured him this was completely his choice. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. The financial strain of legal fees, the emotional toll on the boys, the possibility, however remote, of losing them, it all weighed heavily. I found myself sitting at the kitchen table at 3 a.m, reviewing documents one more time, ensuring everything was in order. Among the papers was an item I had debated including: something I had discovered years earlier but kept private, not even sharing it with the boys. After much consideration, I placed it in a separate envelope, sealed it, and wrote, "Confidential, for judge's eyes only," on the outside. This would be my last resort, my final piece of evidence if Melissa's lies threatened to overwhelm the truth. As dawn broke, I made breakfast for the boys as usual, trying to maintain normalcy despite the extraordinary circumstances. We dressed in our best clothes. Jamie in the suit he had worn to his school's Model UN conference, Max and Liam in button-down shirts and khakis. Before we left for the courthouse, we stood together in the living room, arms around each other. No matter what happens today, I told them, we are a family. Nothing and no one can change that. Jamie, now taller than me, squeezed my shoulders. We know, Grandma, Mom. We're not going anywhere. I wished I could be as certain as he sounded. The truth was, I had no idea what awaited us in that courtroom or how our lives might change before the day was over. The family courthouse was a modern building downtown, all glass and steel, busy with lawyers in suits and families in various states of distress. We checked in at security, then waited in a hallway outside courtroom 3, sitting close together on a hard wooden bench. David reviewed last-minute details with us while we waited to be called. I saw Melissa before she saw me. She walked confidently down the hallway, accompanied by an older man I assumed was her husband, and 2 attorneys carrying expensive briefcases. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her hair and makeup flawless. She looked like a stranger. When her eyes finally met mine, there was a flicker of something. Recognition, perhaps regret. Before her expression hardened into determination, her gaze moved to the boys and she faltered visibly. They had been small children when she left. Now they were young men. Jamie, especially with his height and serious expression, seemed to catch her off guard. Before any words could be exchanged, the bailiff called our case number and we filed into the courtroom. Judge Wilson was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He reviewed the case file briefly, then asked both attorneys for opening statements. Melissa's lawyer, an elegantly dressed woman with a clipped, precise manner, painted a heart-wrenching picture of a young mother struggling with addiction who had temporarily placed her children with their grandmother while seeking treatment. "My client has been in recovery for 8 years," she stated. "She has rebuilt her life, created a stable home, and has been searching desperately for her children, whom Mrs. Foster has deliberately kept hidden from her." David's opening was calm and factual. He outlined the abandonment, the emergency custody granted by the court, the permanent guardianship established after Melissa's continued absence, and my decade of providing a stable, loving home. "This is not a case of abduction," he concluded. "This is a case of a grandmother stepping up when her daughter could not, and creating a family that deserves to remain intact." Melissa testified first. Poised and articulate, she described her struggle with addiction following a car accident and her decision to leave the boys temporarily with me while she sought treatment. She claimed to have called regularly, sent child support when possible, and attempted to visit only to be blocked at every turn. "I just want to be their mother again," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I've created a beautiful life that they deserve to be part of." When David cross-examined her, he asked pointed questions about specific dates and attempts to contact the children. Melissa's answers became vague. She couldn't recall exactly when she had called, couldn't produce records of any child support payments, couldn't name the boys' teachers or doctors or friends. "When was the last time you attempted to contact your sons?" David asked. "I've tried continuously," she insisted. "Can you provide the court with phone records, letters, emails, any evidence of these attempts? My previous phone was lost. I don't have those records." David then presented the court with my phone records, showing Melissa's last text message from 8 years earlier. The returned certified letters I had sent the documentation of the court's own attempts to locate her for the guardianship hearing 7 years ago. Melissa's husband testified next. Richard Bennett was a real estate developer in his late 50s, wealthy and well-spoken. He described their 5-bedroom home in an exclusive neighborhood, the private schools they had researched for the boys, the college funds they had established. He spoke of Melissa as a devoted stepmother to his children from a previous marriage now grown. "We can provide opportunities these boys have never had," he said, looking directly at the judge. "The best education travel advantages that will set them up for success." The implication was clear. Their wealth could provide material benefits I could not. When my turn came to testify, I was terrified but determined. I described the day Melissa had left the boys, the note I found, the gradual realization that she wasn't coming back. I detailed my efforts to create stability for 3 traumatized children, the community we had built, the financial sacrifices made to keep them together and thriving. "These boys have been through one abandonment," I concluded. "They shouldn't have to endure another by being separated from the only consistent parent they've known for the past decade." During cross-examination, Melissa's attorney tried to portray me as a bitter woman who had deliberately kept the children from their mother out of spite. She questioned my age and health, suggesting I was too old to properly care for active boys. She implied the modest neighborhood where we lived was inadequate compared to the opportunities Melissa could provide. "Isn't it true," she asked, "that you never really tried to facilitate a relationship between my client and her sons, that you wanted to replace her in their lives?" "No," I said firmly. "I kept every letter returned undeliverable. I documented every unanswered call. I never stopped telling the boys their mother loved them, even when the evidence suggested otherwise." The boys' testimonies were powerful in their simplicity. Jamie spoke clearly about his memories of being left at my apartment, of waiting days for his mother to return, of building a life with me over the years. "I'm 16 now," he told the judge. "In 2 years, I'll be an adult who can choose where to live. I choose to stay with the person who raised me, my grandma-mom." Max, more hesitant but equally determined, spoke about his dyslexia diagnosis and how I had fought for appropriate educational support. "She never gave up on me," he said. "Even when we couldn't afford the fancy tutoring, she sat with me every night, helping me with homework." Character witnesses followed. Jamie's cross-country coach, Max's art teacher, our longtime neighbor who had watched the boys grow up. Each testified to the stable, loving home I had provided the well-adjusted young men the boys were becoming under my care. As the evidence mounted against her claims, I could see Melissa growing increasingly tense. Her attorney called a recess to confer with her, and I saw them arguing in hushed tones in the hallway. When court resumed, Melissa's attorney attempted a new strategy, suggesting a compromise split custody with the boys, dividing their time between my home and Melissa's. The judge asked the boys directly if this was something they would consider. Jamie and Max both firmly declined. It was clear the case wasn't going as Melissa had planned. Her attorney made a last desperate argument about blood ties and maternal rights trumping all other considerations. That's when I knew it was time. I asked David to present the sealed envelope to the judge. "Your Honor, there is one final piece of evidence relevant to these proceedings," David said. "Mrs. Foster has maintained this information privately out of concern for the children's well-being, but feels it must now be considered." The judge accepted the envelope, opened it, and began reading the contents. His expression changed visibly, eyebrows raising, mouth tightening. He looked up at Melissa, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Do they know what's inside?" he asked me, indicating the boys. "No, Your Honor," I replied. I've never shown them. The judge nodded thoughtfully, then asked everyone except the attorneys to step outside while he reviewed the evidence more thoroughly. As we filed out, I caught Melissa's eye. For the first time since the proceedings began, she looked afraid. We waited in the hallway for nearly an hour, the boys questioning what had been in the envelope, me deflecting as gently as I could. Finally, we were called back in. The judge's demeanor had shifted noticeably. He addressed the court with a stern expression. Having reviewed all evidence presented, including the confidential document submitted by Mrs. Foster, I am prepared to rule on this matter. First, I find the kidnapping allegations completely without merit. Mrs. Foster obtained legal guardianship through proper channels after Ms. Bennett abandoned her children. All procedural requirements were followed, including attempts to notify the mother. He turned his attention directly to Melissa. Ms. Bennett, the court finds your testimony regarding attempts to contact your children to be not credible. The confidential evidence demonstrates you were living under another name in California during the time you claim to have been searching for your children. Records indicate multiple arrests for prescription fraud during your claimed period of recovery. Most troublingly, you made no attempt to contact your children until after your marriage to Mr. Bennett. Melissa's face had gone pale. The judge continued. The court finds it in the best interest of the children to remain in the custody of their grandmother, who has provided a stable, nurturing environment for the past decade. Ms. Bennett may petition for visitation rights after completing parenting classes and demonstrating 6 months of supervised visitation if the children consent to such visits. He addressed the boys directly. Young men, the law recognizes that children your age have significant say in these matters. Your wishes have been heard and respected by this court. Gah. With a final tap of his gavel, he dismissed us, ending Melissa's attempt to reclaim the children she had abandoned a decade earlier. Outside the courtroom, Richard Bennett stormed off without a word. Melissa lingered, looking at her sons as if seeing them clearly for the first time. I just wanted, she began, but couldn't seem to find the words to complete the thought. Jamie, always the protector, stepped slightly in front of his brothers. We have a good life, he said simply. We're okay. Melissa nodded slowly. Maybe we could talk sometime when you're ready. Maybe, Jamie conceded, though his tone suggested he wasn't convinced. As we drove home, the boys were uncharacteristically quiet, processing everything that had happened. Finally, Max asked the question they were all thinking. What was in the envelope, Grandma, Mom? I sighed. They were old enough now for this truth, difficult as it was. Private investigator reports, I explained. Years ago, when I was still trying to find your mother, I hired someone to locate her. He discovered she was living in California under her maiden name, with a criminal record for prescription fraud. I kept the information private, hoping someday she would get the help she needed and return on her own terms. I never wanted to destroy your image of her entirely. Why did she come back now after all this time? Liam asked. I think she convinced herself she was doing the right thing, I said carefully. People are complicated. Sometimes they rewrite history to make themselves feel better about their choices. You mean she lied? Jamie said bluntly. Yes, I acknowledged. She lied. To the court, perhaps to her husband. Maybe even to herself. In the year following the court case, our family began a new chapter of healing and growth. The judge's ruling had provided legal finality to what we had known emotionally for years. We were a family bound not by conventional definitions, but by love-shared history and choice. Melissa's reappearance in our lives, while traumatic, had ultimately provided a kind of closure. The boys no longer had to wonder where their mother was or why she had left. The fantasy that she had been desperately searching for them was replaced by the harder truth she had chosen to build a new life without them until it became convenient to claim otherwise. Jamie decided after much consideration to meet with Melissa for coffee about 2 months after the hearing. He went alone, setting clear boundaries about what he was and wasn't willing to discuss. "How was it?" I asked when he returned, trying not to hover anxiously. "Weird," he admitted. She talked about her house and her husband's kids and the vacation they took to Europe. It was like she was trying to sell me on her life. "Are you going to see her again?" He shrugged. "Maybe. Not soon. She's kind of empty, like there's no real person there, just someone playing a role." The insight was startlingly perceptive for a 16-year-old, though Jamie had always seen more clearly than most. Max refused contact, initially channeling his complicated feelings into his artwork. A series of paintings he created that winter won a citywide youth art competition. Abstract pieces that the judges praised for their emotional depth and sophisticated understanding of loss and resilience. Liam, with the flexibility of the very young, agreed to occasional supervised visits with Melissa. His curiosity about this stranger who was biologically his mother outweighed his apprehension. These visits were awkward at first, but gradually developed into a cautious relationship. Not mother and son in any meaningful sense, but something like distant relatives with a complicated connection. Melissa completed the court-mandated parenting classes and started the supervised visitation program. But her interest waned as it became clear the boys would not be seamlessly absorbed into her curated life. Her visits became less frequent, her calls more sporadic. By the following summer, she had essentially disappeared from our lives again, this time by quiet withdrawal rather than sudden abandonment. The lawsuit, while vindicating, had depleted my savings completely. David had been generous with his billing, but legal representation of that caliber came at a significant cost. To rebuild our financial security, I increased my hours at the clinic despite my arthritis making long shifts increasingly painful. The boys pitched in more at home, and Jamie took a weekend job at a local grocery store to save for college expenses. As a family, we continued our therapy sessions, working through the complex emotions stirred up by Melissa's reappearance and the court battle. The therapist helped the boys understand they could acknowledge the pain of their mother's choices without letting it define their futures. "Family isn't just biology," she reminded them. "It's showing up day after day. It's the people who stay." The boys continued to thrive despite these challenges. Jamie was accepted to the state university with a partial academic scholarship, planning to study pre-med. Max's artistic talents expanded to include digital media, opening up potential career paths, combining technology and creativity. Liam, now in middle school, had joined the school band and discovered a talent for trumpet that none of us had anticipated. On a bright May morning, we gathered in the high school auditorium for Jamie's graduation. He stood tall in his cap and gown, the Gold Honor Society cord draped around his neck, reflecting his academic achievements. As his name was called, Max Liam, and I cheered loudly from our seats, undoubtedly embarrassing him in the way families are supposed to embarrass graduates. After the ceremony, as we navigated through the crowd of proud families taking photos, Jamie surprised me by pulling us into a quiet corner of the lobby. "I have something for you," he said, handing me a small wrapped package. "From all of us." Inside was a delicate silver necklace with 4 interlocking circles, one for each of us forming an unbreakable chain. "We had it custom made," Max explained. "The jewelry store lady thought it was weird that teenagers were designing a necklace, but we saved up for months." "Turn it over," Liam urged. On the back, tiny letters were engraved, family by choice, forever. I couldn't speak through my tears as Jamie fastened it around my neck. "You chose us when you didn't have to," he said. "When our own mother walked away, you stepped up. Everything we are, everything we'll become. It's because of you." The journey from that October day when 3 small boys appeared at my door to this moment had been filled with hardships I never anticipated in my quiet retirement plans. Financial struggles, health concerns, legal battles, the constant worry that comes with raising children in today's world. None of it had been easy, but standing there surrounded by my grandsons, young men now with futures bright with possibility, I knew I would choose this path again without hesitation. Family isn't always what we expect it to be. Sometimes it's cobbled together from broken pieces, held together by commitment and daily acts of love. For anyone out there raising children who didn't come to you in traditional ways, whether you're a grandparent raising grandchildren, a foster parent, an adoptive parent, or someone who simply stepped up when a child needed you, know that you are doing sacred work. The family you build through love and choice is every bit as real and valuable as any other. If my story resonates with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their unconventional family journey. Leave a comment below about your own experience with blended or chosen families. And if you've appreciated joining me on this journey, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and love in all its forms. Remember, it's not the circumstances that define a family. It's the love that holds it together through all of life's unexpected turns.